At E3 2019, Nintendo shocked everyone and announced a sequel for Zelda Breath of the Wild. In retrospect, this shouldn't have been altogether that surprising, especially given the fact that Breath of the Wild was released over 2 years ago, so a sequel announcement certainly makes sense. However, this is Nintendo, and if you are a Nintendo fan, you know that they are just different. Just because a game is successful doesn't mean that Nintendo will make a sequel for it, and the same is true for unsuccessful games that still get follow-up entries. In this video, we will be examining the possibilities that this sequel will have as a new entry in the franchise. Direct Zelda sequels are pretty rare. Across nearly 24 entries in the series, there are only a few direct sequels, so it wasn't ever a given that Nintendo would follow up the original Breath of the Wild with a direct sequel. Now that we know that this game takes place in the same world, we have certain limitations that we must discuss, as well as ways to improve things that the original game lacked. First, from a gameplay perspective, we know that the world is the same from the first game. We don't know how much is being changed, and we don't know what happens after Hyrule Castle takes off into the sky. Possible scenarios that happen at this point include a dark world opening up, as we saw in Zelda: A Link to the Past, other changes around Hyrule, or perhaps we travel to some new part of the map that we previously didn't have access to. One thing is certain though, and that is the core element of Breath of the Wild that hooked me the most, exploration, is likely to be different this time around. If the game truly exists in the same world, with the same map, then the biggest part of what made Breath of the Wild such a great game will largely be the same as the last game. Sure, there may be some changes here and there, which will certainly be interesting to explore and figure out, but the sheer excitement of climbing to the top of the next hill will certainly be different. And on some level, I am okay with that. Using the same world affords tremendous new opportunities to make this new Zelda better in many other respects. That could be in telling a linear, more engaging story. That could be reintroducing themed dungeons. That could be reintroducing special items. The opportunity for a hybrid new and old Zelda formula is now there. For players who haven't played the first Breath of the Wild, this could be an amazing experience that includes the best of both worlds. No pun intended. So assuming that the overworld is the same, I think that there will certainly be new enemies unleashed across the land that may be entirely different than what we saw before. The trailer insinuates that Ganondorf, Ganon's human form, is being resurrected. This gives Breath of the Wild 2 a tremendous potential opportunity for better storytelling by having a true villain, which Breath of the Wild really lacked. Ganon in the first game was basically an incarnation of evil, and from a story perspective was a weak villain. One of the ways Ocarina of Time was so great was that Ganondorf was a true villain with thoughts, emotions, and desires. He spoke to you and had grand designs to conquer Hyrule. Who knows how much he may be in Breath of the Wild 2, but I feel that the Zelda team heard some of the criticism levied at Breath of the Wild around its somewhat non-existent story. And really, if the emphasis is no longer solely on exploration, then the story will definitely need to be much more fleshed out. Around the game world, what will replace shrines? Will we just have more shrines? Perhaps newer, harder ones that appear all across the landscape? Personally, I quite enjoyed the shrines, but not the combat ones. If Nintendo includes, say, 60 puzzle shrines, but also includes proper dungeons, I think that will be a great mixture of the new and the old. Finding new shrines will still help coax exploration, but those of us that enjoy a dungeon that takes 2 or 3 hours to work through will get that as well. In fact, story and lack of true-themed dungeons were the largest complaints besides breakable weapons in Breath of the Wild. I have no idea if that is going to change, because if it does, it totally changes how the game is played. That's not to say that it can't be done, as there could simply be non-breakable leveled weapons, or maybe upgradable weapons, but that would require major retooling. My bet is that the breakable weapons will return. Ideally, I would like an entirely new world to explore, be it a dark world that is thematically similar but topographically different, and I will take that. I am just worried that the entire overworld is exactly the same with different enemies and a different story and dungeons. If that is the case, much of the magic of the first game will no longer be there. That being said, that doesn't mean that Breath of the Wild 2 will not be a spectacular game. It may just be totally different. We know that it is definitely going to be darker, as Eiji Aonuma already confirmed that it is a pretty dark game. I am excited about that, as he already heard how people were comparing the tone to Majora's Mask, and that was a totally different kind of game than Ocarina of Time was, but it was still an amazing game. I'm starting to think we may see the sequel to Breath of the Wild be similar in that it will still be a great game on its own, but a totally different kind of game than Breath of the Wild was. And that is perfectly fine with me. Nintendo invested so much time and effort into building the world of Breath of the Wild, along with the intricate physics system, that they didn't want to abandon it just yet. That just means that the sequel will be a totally different kind of game. While I'd love another game like Breath of the Wild, I just don't see how that is going to be possible using the same world, even if there is a dark version of it. The most I am hoping for is a much more intricate story that is linear and fully themed dungeons. I actually quite enjoyed the Divine Beasts because there was so little combat, and they were solely focused on puzzles. They were really fun, but there was also only 4 of them. Much of the game was focused on actually getting into the Divine Beasts, so the entire experience took several hours, but once inside, each one could be completed in 30 minutes to an hour. I hope that Breath of the Wild 2 opens up subterranean areas. Caves have always been a huge part of the Zelda series, but there were woefully few of them in Breath of the Wild. I'd love for, in lieu of a dark world, to open up some kind of underworld of caverns and underground cities or something to that effect. A totally new area to explore, with familiar territory up above. In the reveal trailer, Zelda and Link are exploring a huge subterranean area, which is exciting. I'm hoping that we get more areas like this in the actual game to explore. The scene makes it look like they've traveled quite some distance, as they have a pack animal and are stopping to rest. I love underground exploration, and this is something that Breath of the Wild simply did not have at all. I hope that the physics system also returns, and I am sure it will, along with Link's abilities from the first game. It remains to be seen if you will keep everything you learned from the first game, but in sequels you usually don't, so who knows. I'm sure that there will be some kind of story element that is introduced early in the game that strips Link of his abilities, Metroid style. So, Breath of the Wild is one of my favorite games ever. I feel like I should be a little more excited for this than I am, but I think it is because we really don't know what kind of game it will be. I know that I fell in love with the formula for the first game, and I almost know that this sequel will likely not be the same. But that is okay. I'm sure that it will still be a great game, and I am heavily anticipating its release. Speaking of release, that's another reason why I can't get too hyped for this game. It is probably at least another 2 years away, likely a fall 2021 game if I had to place a bet. But who knows? If they really are just using the same overworld, then they are already 2 years into development, and we could potentially see this game sooner than 2021. This being Nintendo, however, I highly doubt that. So what do you guys think? Are you excited to play Breath of the Wild 2? Let's discuss in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe, maybe click that bell icon, and as always, thank you so much for watching.